Hi, I'm Captain Nabia Sheikh. In Virtual SOS, I was offered content in a broad range of subjects related to air power, space power, national security, warfare, and joint operations. The content prompted me to think critically about the context in which airmen employ air, space, and cyber capabilities in today's operational environment. In this video, I'll explore what content made me think differently about air power, space power, national security, warfare, and joint operations. Then I'll outline what I assess to be the two most critical issues related to air power in the context of national security, warfare, and joint operations. For context, currently I'm stationed at NAS Pensacola as an instructor for undergraduate combat systems officers who have recently joined the Air Force. My expertise, though, is in electronic warfare because I was an electronic warfare officer in the EC-130, which is also known as Compass Call. I've deployed to both Ali El Salim and Bagram Air Base and spent time in Al Udeid Air Base as well. Over the course of my time flying on Compass Call, I've taken part in joint operations with sister services and NATO allies and planned integrating air power with other assets to include both the ground and water. My TDY and deployment experience gave me understanding of air power, space power, national security, and joint operations. However, after reading Philip S. Mellinger's Bomber, The Formation and Early Years of Strategic Air Command for SOS, I began to think differently about air power. In my combat experience, I've only seen air power exercised against insurgents on a tactical level. Most often, in our plane, we supported troops on the ground through close air support, and we were tasked to support an operation that had maybe 4 players total among ground and air components. However, during World War II, for air power, the goal was to destroy the industrial war-making capacity of Germany and restrict the Axis air operations. Following their doctrinal beliefs from Axe, planners studied information on the German economy to determine what made it tick. Once they understood what the economy needed and what worked, it would be easier to figure out how to break it. Using data from bombing tests before the war and from combat operations already conducted by the RAF, planners determined the weight of ordnance needed to destroy a variety of structures. They projected loss rates in planes and crews and then estimated how many aircraft on all types would be needed, as well as the number of personnel required to fly, maintain, and support such an air force. The planners determined that over 63,000 aircraft and 135,000 pilots and over 2.1 million total personnel would be needed. This varies greatly from our attacks against the Taliban in Afghanistan or even in Mosul attacking ISIS. The scale of planes needed during World War II were much more massive, and the attrition rate of planes were so low that the Allies were struggling to keep production up. In contrast, we have fewer planes, fewer pilots, and a smaller air force, combating insurgents who hide in plain, population-dense areas under the cover of civilians. The foundations of air power and how much planning on an operational and strategic level is what made me think on air power's shift. The planners today have a similar feat when deciding which bombs to drop to avoid the most collateral damage. The magnitude of planning that goes into air power and the number of assets needed to integrate to have a successful mission goes beyond the 3 to 4 air and ground assets working together on an op on any given night in Bagram. And reading this book, I guess that's what really compelled me to see that air power is much bigger and involves much more planning than I had ever even anticipated. I assess that the two most critical issues related to air power in the context of national security, warfare, or joint operations are lack of communication and over-communicating. And I know that might seem like I'm saying the opposite things, but the lack of communication is between assets within the military not knowing the capability of other players. In Compass Call, for example, we have a long time tradition of keeping our capabilities overclassified to the point where EWOs have to educate ground forces and other air players or even cyber of what our jet brings to the fight. Similarly, before deploying, I wasn't educated on the extent of cyber and space's capabilities. Only after arriving in theater did I realize they offer so much groundwork before planes even launch into the air for a secure and successful mission. The cross-flow of communication and the learning of integrating assets needs to start in initial qualification for flyers, as opposed to something that is learned on the job once deployed. Contrastingly, the second issue related to air power in the context of national security is the over-communication of assets, or the over-communication to assets, corporations, media outside of the DoD, and other people that don't need to know defense contracting. Matters of defense need to be better controlled through OPSEC, and a level of scrutiny needs to be administered to anyone who violates OPSEC. Even though we have established air superiority in Operation Inherent Resolve and Operation Enduring Freedom, we as an Air Force have faced many setbacks due to insurgents knowing information about our tactics and forming new counter tactics. The slow adapting and forming lessons learned, which took place in the past, is now streamlined through media, and insurgents are getting faster at keeping up with the fight.